Hey friends, welcome or welcome back. My name is Shannon, and today we are going to chat about 5 books that took me everywhere, from a luxurious West Virginia resort to some quiet Finnish islands, from World War I England to a quirky Palms Spring summer. Let's get into what I enjoyed, what surprised me, and what made me ugly cry. First up, I have The Listeners by Maggie Stiefvater. This was published earlier this year in 2025, and it's a historical novel set in 1942 at a luxurious hotel and spa in West Virginia, which is known for its famous Sweetwater springs that claim to have healing properties. We're following June Hudson, the hotel's general manager, who has been in charge of this hotel since she was a teenager after she took over from the wealthy family that owned the hotel after they decided to take a step back. June is meticulous, she's capable, and the staff absolutely adore her. She also has a special connection to the Sweetwater Springs. One day, the State Department comes knocking and requisitions the hotel. We are in the early months of America's involvement in World War II, and they want to house some foreign diplomats from Germany, Italy, and Japan at the hotel. So these diplomats and their families aren't exactly imprisoned, more like detained. And so at the hotel, they can be housed with the comfort that they are used to as diplomats while being under constant surveillance by the FBI. So now June has a problem. She is housing enemy nationals while the Appalachian community is rightfully outraged. Their sons are off fighting and they are expected to serve these enemies. The other major thread of the story is Hannah, a young, nonverbal German girl staying at the hotel with her German diplomat parents. Hannah also seems to have an unusual connection to the Sweetwater Springs. So between June and Hannah, we seem to have a touch of magical realism, but it's ever so slight. Hannah also seems to listen in a way that other people don't. So the story unfolds as subtle acts of resistance start to take shape amongst the town, the guests, the hotel staff, and maybe even the Sweetwater itself. Everyone is a listener in this book. Hannah, the Sweetwater, the hotel staff, not just the FBI. I read this the same day that I purchased it, and I finished it within 24 hours. I really enjoyed it. It was very atmospheric, and I wasn't expecting the weaving in of the slight magical realism into the story, but I actually didn't dislike it at all. And even though this is set in World War II and is based on real historical events, the American government did actually requisition hotels and did house foreign diplomats, but this isn't a typical World War II novel, and June is not your typical World War II heroine. There is a slight romance element between June and one of the FBI agents, but it's on the periphery. This is not a romance novel either. So, okay, this isn't a magical novel, it isn't a World War II novel or a romance novel. Well, you're asking, what is it? I just found it a very compelling novel, and though I can't really define it, I do recommend it. Next up is another war novel, but instead of World War II, we're going into World War I with The Summer Before the War by Helen Simonson. So this is set in the idyllic town of Rye in 1914, just before the outbreak of World War I. We are following Beatrice Nash, who is an educated and independent young woman who arrives in the town to teach Latin, hoping for a fresh start after the death of her father. So at this time, women generally were not teachers of Latin. However, her position was championed by a local woman named Agatha Kent. And as Beatrice becomes part of the town's social world, particularly with Agatha and Agatha's nephews, Hugh and Daniel, she encounters small town politics, class tensions, and early feminist struggles. But the novel's light, witty tone gradually darkens as Europe edges towards war, and the characters' lives are transformed by this conflict that will soon reshape everything that they know. This is definitely not a summer book, although it does give good summer descriptions and that carefree feeling before the atrocities happen. I had read this during the summer. If you remember several videos back, it was on my summer TBR, so I did read it in the summer, hoping it would be a summer novel. I would not call this a summer book. I really did enjoy this, but I had hoped that it would stay lighthearted and not delve too deep into the war. I had hoped that the war coming would always be in the background. That being said, the war scenes were powerful, and there really were some ugly crying moments. There was a whole story thread with one of the young kids in the town of Rye who does end up going to the front, and just absolute heartbreaking scenes with this kid. Ugly crying. I'm telling you, just ugly, ugly, ugly crying. I do feel that this could have been a little bit shorter. I was starting to get fatigued by the end of the story by the constant classism and sexism that permeated this particular time in history. It's not that Simonson was incorrect. I was just getting a little fatigued with it. I will say Agatha is a very interesting character. She's half progressive, but still hampered by her prejudices, but she knows her limits. For example, she lobbies really hard for female advancement, but then refuses to consider visiting a woman who is currently living outside the sexual norms of the time. It just shows that feminism was and still is imperfect. So I really liked that aspect that Simonson was giving us here. We have a woman who clearly wants to be feminist, but only with certain things. She knows her limits. So all of that, I do recommend this, but note that it is not as summery and it does not stay lighthearted. All right, next I have Freshwater for Flowers by Valerie Perrin, translated from the French by Hildegard Serre. In the story, we are following Violette Toussaint, a quiet, solitary woman who works as a cemetery caretaker in a small French town. Though her life appears to be ordinary, Violette carries profound grief, complicated love, and a past marked by abandonment and loss. We meet an array of very interesting characters and complicated characters, including Violette's co-workers at the cemetery and her not-so-good husband, Philippe. One day, a police officer named Julien arrives at Violette's cemetery with questions about his late mother's unusual burial request. So at the arrival of Julien, Violette is drawn into something that ends up colliding her past with her present. We're now learning Violette's story through alternating timelines, diary entries, and glimpses of the lives of the deceased buried in Violette's cemetery, as well as their families. And the novel explores themes of resilience, healing, love in its many forms, and the unexpected connections that help us move forward. This is beautifully written. I read it in 1.5 sittings because it was just so compelling and I couldn't put it down. Again, lots of ugly crying. I can't tell you why. It would just ruin it. It's just so beautiful and heartbreaking and gut-wrenching, but not in a bad way. I wish I could tell you, but I can't. So my only real issue with this story is that there was an unrealistic, in my opinion, redemption of a certain character. I personally just didn't buy this redemption, but this story also did contain lots of talk about God and love, so maybe the author's intention is that everyone does deserve redemption, even this particular character. So this is a sad and beautiful story, yet it still left me with a sense of hope. and I highly, highly recommend it. Beautiful story. Next up, I have The Guncle by Stephen Rowley. I will put a picture up here because I have given my copy to my mother to read. And in this story, we are following Patrick O'Hara, who is a reclusive and former famous sitcom star. Think Joey from Friends. Patrick is living a quiet, sun-soaked life in Palm Springs. His routine is upended when he unexpectedly becomes the temporary guardian of his young niece and nephew, Maisie and Grant, after their mother passes away and their father is understandably in crisis. As Patrick navigates grief, single parenting, and his own unresolved heartbreak, gay Uncle Patrick, or Guncle, offers the kids his unique blend of humor, candor, and Guncle rules. Patrick is definitely way over his head with taking care of the kids, and he himself hasn't processed all of the losses in his life, including the loss of the children's mother, who was his best friend. But Patrick is that cool uncle that everyone wants, while instilling life lessons and also providing the kids with a little bit of stability at this time. Their summer together becomes a healing journey for all three of them. This story was adorable and it was funny, and there were some laugh out loud moments, especially as Patrick talks to the kids like adults and he actually expects them to have the same pop culture knowledge as he does. And from what I could tell, Patrick is roughly, mid 40s, my age. So we have all this pop culture knowledge that the kids just don't have these days. And so I found that very funny. Lots of laugh out loud moments. I also like how Rowley kept this lighthearted despite the heavy content of children losing their mother and, for a time, their father. It was just really well done. There was no ugly crying in here. It was still lighthearted. It was funny. I enjoyed it. There is a sequel to this story, The Guncle Abroad or something like that. However, I felt like The Guncle was wrapped up perfectly and I actually don't need any more. So I'm probably not going to read the sequel, but do recommend this, and it is a good summer read. And last, I have The Summer Book by Tove Jansson, translated from the Swedish by Thomas Teal. Yes, I know this is December, yet I am talking all about summer books. It's only now that I'm able to start getting up reviews of the books that I read several months ago. So I did actually read this in the summer. And this is a quiet, reflective novel about the relationship between a 6-year-old girl, Sophia, and her wise, sharp-tongued grandmother as they spend a summer together on a small Finnish island. This is told in short, loosely connected vignettes where the two explore the island, talk about life and death, they argue, they reconcile, and they observe nature together. This book is tender, it's funny, it's philosophical, and it does capture the beauty of ordinary moments and the bond between generations. So you have the grandmother who is nearing the end of her life, while Sophia is just beginning hers. Both of these generations have wisdom and both have naivete. People don't pay attention to the very young or the very old, so grandmother and Sophia are essentially living on the outskirts of the family while the generation in the middle is trying to get on with and build their lives. Sophia and grandmother argue about heaven and hell, and death seems ever present throughout these vignettes, whether it's a dead duck that grandmother sees, or it's Sophia being upset by a sandcastle being washed away. I liked this a lot, but I didn't love it. It was beautifully written. I really liked the grandmother. She is grumpy, she's creaky, she likes to sneak a cigarette, and she's very exasperated by Sophia. That being said, I had a visceral reaction to Sophia, and I honestly couldn't stand her. And I feel bad saying that because she's only 6 years old. But this also shows how real Jansson made her characters. To me, these were real people. I know this grandmother. I know Sophia. So these are real characters, and I had real reactions to them. So even though I didn't love this, I probably will reread it eventually, and I do recommend it. So that is it. 5 books that I've recently read that I have enjoyed and I do recommend. Have you read any of these? Please let me know. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining and have a great day. Bye.